So this video is about fractions, decimals and percentages. So pretty standard stuff. And we're going to learn how to convert between each three and then do like a ton of practice because that is the way to do maths. Okay, so I've drawn the setup. So we're going from fractions, decimals and percentages. So I'm going to just discuss what you do at each stage. So if you have a fraction and you want to get to a decimal, so let's say a fraction is a half, so you know, typical fraction we all know. To get there, you just literally divide. So you actually perform 1 divided by 2, and you could do that long division or whatever, and that would give you 0.5, which we all kind of recognise on the number line as being a half. So we kind of knew that, we knew that fraction, we knew that. Wait, I'll just show you the long division approach. So if we've got 1 divided by 2 looks like this. So we ask the question, how many 2's go into 1? And it's 0 because there's not enough. So then we add these and we have 1 left over. So how many 2's go into 10? And 2 goes into 10 5 times. So that is how we perform the division. Okay, so we've done that step, and what about how to get from decimals to percentages? Now percentages, I love this word because it's so self-explanatory. So per means out of, and then cent or cent, pardon the French accent, means 100. So cent, cent is 100 in French. So that is out of 100. So to get from decimal to percentage, you multiply by 100. So if we do 0.5 multiplied by 100, that means we shift the decimal place right 2, so we go 1, 2, and you get 50%, which, because we used a nice example of a half, 0.5 and 50%, we can see how that works. What if I was going from a fraction to a percentage? So let's start with the same one, just so we already know the answer, a bit of cheating. So we've got a fraction and we want to get to a percentage, and we know that percent is per out of cent 100. So we want something out of 100. Okay, and because this is fractions and we know exactly what we're doing with fractions, if we do this to the bottom, we have to do the same to the top, numerator, denominator, you know, that correct terminology. So to get 2 to 100, I have multiplied that by 50. And we want to get to 100 because it's out of 100. So if we're going to percentage, you always want 100 on the bottom. So we do the same to the top as the bottom. So 1 times 50 is 50. So that is now, it's still a fraction, but it's a fraction out of 100. So therefore we know that we can write just this is 50 out of 100. So 50%. So 50 out of 100, 50%. So we've got 100 on the bottom. You just write this top number as the percent. Okay, let's work backwards. What about if we're going the other way and we start with a percentage and we want to get a decimal? So, you know, this is maths, so if you go this way and you do that, you do the inverse the other way, so we know it's divide by 100. So if we looked at that, we could see if we add 50%, and as we know, 50% is 50% out of 100. And we could perform that division, so that is 50 divided by 100, hence you always divide by 100. And if you do 50 divided by 100, what you do is you move the decimal place 1, so decimal point there, 1, 2, backwards 2. So yeah, just did the opposite of moving it right 2 that we just did. Okay, so that seems reasonable enough. Just divide by 100, move the decimal place left 2 basically. So what about the last step? And this last step is decimal to fraction. Now this is kind of the annoying one. This is my least fave, but we don't want that mental attitude against it just to start off. We've got to give everyone a chance. So a decimal to a fraction. Let's say I had, what was I at? 0.5, and I want that as a fraction. I always kind of look at how many points I have past the decimal point. So this is going to equal And because it's only the first one passed, I put 10, so the 1, 0. And then I just take this 5 and I put it on top. And then that cancels down, that simplifies to a half, which we know that to be. If I had 0.05 and I wanted a fraction, now we can see we're not on the kind of 10th point past the decimal point, we're on the 100. So because we're the 2 points after this point, we put 100 on the bottom, and then we put 5 on top. And then that's going to cancel down to 1/20. So basically, you always have to try and create this fraction first and then simplify it down. We'll do another example. So here's my decimal and I want to get it as a fraction. So what I do is I create my fraction and I notice I've got 2 after the decimal point. So I'm going to put 100 there, so 2 zeros. And then I can just put this 83 on top, and that is that as a fraction. And then you can simplify it down if you can, but that one we can't simplify, so we just leave like that. Let's do another one. 0.09, there's my decimal, and I want to get it as a fraction, so I'm going this way. So I look at the number after the decimal point, and it's 2, so that's going to be 100. And then we just put the 9 up there, and then simplify if we can. So that's how we do that one. I call that method look at decimal point. Okay, so now we've looked at an example of how to do each of those. It's literally just now, and practice makes perfect situation. So I've got a lot of exam questions that we can literally breeze through because they aren't too bad. Okay, so let's have a look at these first. So we want to write a quarter as a percentage. So we're going from fraction to percentage. And we know that percentage, the word, is kind of making it easy for us, is out of 100. So what I do there is I've got this, and I want something percent out of 100. So what have I done to the bottom? How have I gone 4 to get to 100? I have multiplied by 25, and that means if I've done it to the denominator, I need to do it to the numerator, the top 2. So I do 1 times 25. So that is now 25, and then 25 divided by 100, or 25 per 100, 25%. So as I've literally just said, I've just read it out, so 25%. So 25%, that's the first one. Let's do this 0.23 as a percentage. So we're going from a decimal to a percentage. So you could see that as a fraction of 23 out of 100 and then write 23%, or you could follow this rule of 0.23 multiplied by 100. So that means you move the decimal point 2 this way, 1, 2, and you just get 23%. Now we have 42% as a fraction. So first I read 42%, so I write 42% out of 100. Oh, I've done the question. Careful though, you aren't quite finished because this can be simplified. So that simplifies down to 21/50, so you divide each, the top and the bottom, by 2. So yeah, it's as easy as reading that as 42%, but don't forget to simplify. The next one, we have 9/10 as a decimal, so we're going fraction to decimal, and it just says divide, so it literally just says do 9 divided by 10. So if we do 9 divided by 10, you can either do that long division ways, or you can kind of know it. Do you know what, we'll do it as long division. So 9 divided by 10. So how many 10s go into 9? Well, 9 isn't enough, so 0 10s go into 9, so we add these. How many remainder did we get? So 0 went, so you've got 9 left. How many 10s go into 90? That would be 9 exactly, so we stop there. So you've literally performed the 9 divided by 10, which gives you 0.9. Okay, so this one, 3/4 as a percentage. So we have 3/4, and we want it as a percent, so we want it as a per 100. So percent, per 100. So what have I done to the bottom, so 4, to get to 100? I've multiplied by 25, and this is fractions, and we know we have to do the same to the top and the bottom, so I do 3 multiplied by 25, which gives me 75. So now I have this fraction, 75 over 100, also considered as 75 per 100, 75%. So as I've just read it, 75%. This one, we have 23% as a fraction. So if we just read 23%, we say that's 23 per cent, per 100. And boom, we literally have a fraction. Now you always have to check if you can simplify it, but in this case we can't, so there's the answer. That was nice. Now we have 1/5 as a percentage. So we're going from a fraction to a percentage, so just like this one we did. So we've got 1/5, and we want it per cent, per 100, out of 100. So what have I done to get 5 to 100? I multiply the bottom by 20, so that means I have to multiply the top by 20, so 1 multiplied by 20 is 20, and as we read that now, it's 20 out of 100, 20%, just said it, 20%. What about this last one, 0.8 as a percentage? So we're at a decimal and we're going to a percentage, so we multiply by 100. So if we multiply 0.8 by 100, that means you move the decimal point to the right 2, so 1, 2, and that means you get 80. So that's going to be 80%. There's more to come. Okay, so number 9, 76% as a decimal. So we're going from a percent to a decimal, so we divide by 100. So if I have 76 divided by 100, that means I move this point back 1, 2. So my answer is 0.76. Number 10, 1/10 as a percentage. So we have 1 over 10 and we want a per 100, a percentage. So what have I done to the 10 to get it out of 100? I've multiplied by 10. If I've done that to the bottom, I'm going to have to do that to the top. So 1 times 10 is 10. So now we have 10 out of 100, which is the same as the 1/10. But this is in more, we can read this straight off. So 10 out of 100, 10%, 10%. Boom. Number 11, 60% as a decimal. So we have a percent out of 100 and we're going to a decimal. So it says we divide by 100. So if I have 60 and I divide by 100, that means I move this decimal point to the left 2, 1, 2. So I end up with 0.6. Number 12, so 19% as a fraction. So if we just read off, we've just read 19%, per 100, 19 out of 100. And boom, I literally have a fraction. Check, can we simplify it? No, we can't. Okay, so number 13, unlucky, unless you're Taylor Swift. 0.45 as a percentage. So we've got a decimal to a percentage, so we do 0.45 multiplied by 100, which means we move the decimal point to the right 2, 1, 2. So we end up with 45, and then don't forget the percent. 30% as a fraction. So we're going from a percentage to a fraction. So if we just read off 30%, what would we write in maths? 30% is 30 per 100%. Oh, we already have a fraction, but wait a minute, that can be simplified, so be careful because you can knock a 0 off. So the same thing as 3 out of 10. So they would expect you to write it in the simplest form if it can be expressed. Number 15, 0.3 as a fraction. So we're going decimal to fractions. This was a slightly weird one, and this is the method I could look at the decimal point. So that meant it's only got a number 1 past the decimal point, so I put it over out of 10, and then you just take that number and you put it on top. So that's how you do that, 3/10. Number 16, 3% as a fraction. So again, if we've got 3%, we would think of that as 3 per out of cent, which is 100 in French. Bit of French lesson. And there we go. We have a fraction. And that, can we check? That can be simplified. It cannot be simplified. Okay, so number 17, 3/4 as a decimal. So we're going fraction to decimal, and that says just perform the division. Okay, so I have 3 divided by 4, so if we do our long division, how many 4s go into 3? Well, there's not enough, so 0. But what's the remainder? 3. How many 4s go into 30? 7 times, but we have remainder 2. And then how many 4s go into 20? And that is 5. Some of you might just recognise that that is 3/4 is 75% or 0.75, but otherwise, yeah, do the long division. Number 18, 3/4 is a percentage, which as I was writing out this, did we just do this one? Can't really remember, they all blur into one, but it's good practice. So we've got 3/4 as a percentage, and we know a percentage is out of 100%. So we start with 3/4 and we want it per cent, out of 100. So what have we done with the 4 to get to 100? We've multiplied by 25. If we've done that to the bottom, we also need to do that to the top. So 3 times 25 is 75, and then we can read that as 75 out of 100, 75%, 75%. I really like the percentage sign, I think it's really cool. Anyway, last one, so 9% as a decimal, so we're going percent to decimal, so we divide by 100, so we have 9 divided by 100, which is 9, and then shift this decimal point back to, so 1, 2, so we have 0.09, 0.09. Sometimes people get confused and write 0.9, but that is 90%, so don't fall for that trap, that's why they do small numbers.